Imagine a life where that inner storm, the constant background noise of anxiety, fear, anticipation, finally goes quiet. Not just softened, not just managed, but actually silenced. Because most of us grow up treating happiness like a goal, a destination, something far away, too far away. Epicurus completely flips that logic. In his letter to Menoeceus, philosophy is not an academic exercise, it is instead something practical, which exists to secure the health of the soul. And whether you are young or old, well, it doesn't really matter. The point is to live in a way where the uncertainty about the future doesn't scare you, and the past doesn't weigh you down, but instead becomes a place of blessings. So, where does that actually begin? Epicurus starts by targeting something invisible but powerful, our fears. And the first illusion it breaks is our idea of the gods. But notice something important. Epicurus never says that the gods do not exist. In fact, he argues the exact opposite. Their existence, he claims, is self evident. The real mistake, then, is not denying the gods, but misunderstanding them. That is why Epicurus says that the impious person is not the one who rejects the gods, but the one who attaches to the gods the belief of the many, because what the many attributes to the god is not knowledge, but a collection of false suppositions shaped by fear, imagination, and culture. But for Epicurus, freeing ourselves from religious fear is only half the journey, because there's still something more unsettling waiting in the background: death. And to address it, he appeals not to faith or consolation, but to reason. He says, all good and evil consist in sensation, and death, well, death is the deprivation of sensation, so by definition it cannot be experienced. He says, so long as we exist, death is not with us, but when death comes, then we do not exist. Which means most of the fear around death is about imagining something we will never actually experience. In other words, there's no moment where you and death actually meet. But once that fear begins to fade, a new question emerges, and here Epicurus turns to one of the deepest anxieties of all, the fear that everything is already decided, the fear of fate. He rejects the idea that human life is governed entirely by necessity. In fact, he claims that it is better to follow the myths about the gods than to believe that everything happens by absolute necessity. Why? Because, as he says, the former suggests a hope of placating the gods by worship, whereas the latter involves a necessity that knows no placation. In other words, myths leave room for hope, hope that the gods might listen, forgive, or intervene. Necessity does not. The road remains the same. There is only one way, no alternative, no negotiation. A world ruled entirely by fate is a world where choice becomes an illusion, and Epicurus refuses to accept that. Instead, he insists that that which is in our control is subject to no master. Not everything depends on us, but not everything is out of our control either. So Epicurus basically asks us to avoid two mistakes. The first is believing that life is ruled entirely by chance. The second is believing that everything is fixed by necessity. Epicurus rejects both extremes. There remains a space, limited but real, where human agency still matters. And it is from this position that he makes one of the most striking claims in the entire letter. It is better to be unfortunate in reasonable action than to prosper in unreason. What Epicurus is trying to say is that success alone proves nothing, because wisdom is not measured by what happens to us, but by how we choose to act. And once you understand that, something begins to change. The fears that once weighed heavily on your mind begin to lift. The future becomes less frightening. This is the destination toward which the entire letter has been moving. Not wealth, not immortality, but a mind capable of remaining at peace with itself. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, subscribe to the channel.